Have your life.
Okay. I am hopefully about to share my screen, and apologies again, we've had some. I'm hoping I'm going to share. No, it doesn't seem like it likes me sharing. Of course it doesn't. Let's see if I can do this again, shall we? There we go. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to day one of CSEdX 2024. The theme of the conference this year, as you've probably heard several times and we'll hear several times more, is radical reimagining, rethinking learning, teaching and student engagement for regional universities. And the sub-theme for the presentations today are around assessment and feedback. Just to let everyone know again that this session is being recorded. And before we start, I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. So I pay my respects to First Nations elders past, present and emerging across the many lands where Charles Sturt University campuses, students and staff are located. In particular, I acknowledge the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra and Biripi peoples. I also pay my respects to any First Nations colleagues in this session today. So these are the wonderful presentations that we will be hearing today. The format of this session is that each presentation will be given 10 minutes, and there will be a total of 15 minutes for a Q&A session at the end. So please ensure that your microphones are muted until the Q&A session, but feel free to put a question in the chat so that you don't forget it, because we can always come back to it at a later date. But for now, I am actually going to hand over to Elise.
Is that my cue? Sorry, are you uploading the slides or am I sharing them?
If you can share them, we can upload if it's not working for you, but you go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, can we see those?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so hello everyone, and I guess welcome to our little presentation on developing collaborative moderation approaches in a large multi-cohort subject. Sounds like an incredibly dry topic, I know, but I promise you there's actually some pretty interesting stuff in there. Before I begin though, I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people whose land I am zooming to you from today, and acknowledge all elders past, present, emerging and always, and extend this respect to any First Nations peoples attending this meeting or listening into the recording. So myself, I'm Dr. Elise Rosser, and Shani Herford, who is a colleague of mine, both in the School of Indigenous Australian Studies. We are both non-Indigenous lecturers, which is actually relevant to the collaborative moderation approach we're talking about, because in Indigenous studies, we talk a lot about co-production of knowledge and validity of knowledge and transparency and all this sort of thing in the context of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous ways of knowing. And so we have been thinking about moderation. So some context is, I suppose, what Shani dubbed our origin story. You know, every good superhero team needs a good origin story. And firstly, what is collaborative moderation? Pretty much it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's moderation of assessment. So this is focusing, of course, on the lecturers, the academics side of assessment. You know, when we're looking at the marking, we're ensuring consistency with the marking, and it is moderation that is done in a collaborative way. Now that's pretty sort of vague, but it has to be, because it's sort of not really a strictly prescribed way of doing it. It's using a collaborative approach that works for you and within your team, your school, which is particularly useful when you're teaching, like we do, really large multi-cohort subjects across vast distances. So even though Shani and I work together every single day, we're on video calls every single day, we've actually only met once in person. Being, you know, in a regional university, Shani's in Bathurst and I'm here in Wagga Wagga. And I think that makes it really relevant for Charles Sturt University, and especially, you know, with the vast geographic distances we have between our campuses and a lot of time our teams. So collaborative moderation is essentially taking a collaborative approach to that moderation process. And so how we understand it, how we've developed it, is by having two sets of eyes. So instead of conducting moderation as an individual, looking at the checking, your HDs and your fails and all that sort of thing, we do it at the same time. And we use the technology that makes those geographic distances a little bit less daunting. We actually will use Teams and we share screen. So one of us shares screen, goes into the assessment, and we can both read at the same time and we can discuss the assessment as we're moderating it together. So collaborative moderation emphasizes this collaborative approach, and that's not so much one person driving and the other person agreeing. It's essentially being able to both talk about the assessment, both be able to say, oh, what about this here? What about this here? And also be able to challenge each other. And this has happened multiple times with us. We've been trialing this. I'll say, okay, no, this is a clear fail. And then Shani goes, oh, wait, hang on. What about this here? Because I've just skimmed it a bit too quickly. And so we have that ability to feel more confident in our decision-making, I'd say. So Shani, did you want to explain where we started with the size moderation process just quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really specific approach to moderation that's intended to achieve equity for students and consistency for the school in general. We moderate before and after assessment tasks. When we're doing this before, we have like a blind moderation mark and a meeting, and then afterwards we moderation all fail and HD papers in our cohorts, as well as a sample of papers in the in-between grades. So that kind of approach is really necessary when you're talking with big groups of students and big marking teams, to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we are doing a quality job in achieving our marking purposes overall. And all of this decision to do the collaborative moderation, it actually did come from being proactive about the feedback that we get from students in, the student experience survey response rates. We've got some examples of the kinds of feedback that we use to sort of build this approach to have a look at, including, comments about the consistency of the markers comments or the consistency of the marking approach, and finding that in some of our assignment tasks, it can be very complicated and the students can be a little bit uncertain about the overall process, making sure that the students feel confident that the consistency of markers, that the markers have the same expectations and they're implementing the same process across the marking. So I won't go into the feedback anymore. We only included a couple of samples here of feedback just to give a little bit of a representation of some of the feedback that we built this approach on. But even within our 10 minutes, that's probably cutting it a bit fine. So I'll go back to you for a bit now, Elise.
So yeah, thank you, Shani. So yeah, we know from this SES feedback that consistently every single semester, and I've been teaching IKC 101 since 2018, and Shani, I believe, since 2019. Every single semester, the majority of the SES feedback comments are related to the marking. And in particular, a theme emerged when we were reviewing the years of SES data. It wasn't just, oh, I didn't get a good mark, I'm angry, which, we could expect to see some of that every year, every semester. But there was a consistent theme of consistency. The marking is inconsistent, the marking is inconsistent. I got this kind of feedback and this kind of feedback. Now, IKC 101 in the semester we trialed this had 900 students. And we had a marking team of about 25 markers. I've actually got this written down probably somewhere. And so it's this massive team. And so Shani and I were talking about, what are we going to do about this? This is clearly the biggest issue we're facing. It's coming out every single semester for years and years and years. So we decided to develop this two sets of eyes approach. So at the first, that's what we called it, two sets of eyes checking. And then we worked that into be a collaborative moderation approach, that instead of our normal process, which was I would take, just say, 100 assignments, Shani moderate 100 assignments, our other colleague, Nicholas Riddell, would moderate 100 assignments. Instead, Shani and I sat down together to look at a few assignments. And what we actually found, and this is where we actually sort of developed it just from this anecdotal experience, was that we were moderating more assignments in less time in this collaborative approach. And so that's when we thought, okay, let's do this for real. Let's actually trial this and see if it actually changes, makes any difference. And in particular, I would say that intermark reliability is really important there, that we know that there is consistency between markers. And what we found, of course, was that there wasn't. And when you have, nearly 1,000 students and dozens of markers, it's really hard to ensure, especially if you're only looking at fails and HD. So part of what we did in our collaborative approach, because we get through so many more assignments, we checked more assignments. We looked at random ones. We looked at all the borderlines. We looked at credits. We looked at distinctions. We looked at passes. And we found that there was a lot of inconsistency, confirming all those students, all those years saying that the marking was inconsistent. Yeah, they were right. And we need to listen to them. And so this seems to have had some pretty significant impacts. I've got no idea how much longer we have left, but I'm sure it's running out.
Probably not long, so we better skip through fast.
3 minutes. All right. Okay. So what we found was that we've actually repeated this the next semester as well, and we're finding the results are pretty much the same. So we moderated probably double the amount of assignments we normally do. So we always keep records of how many assignments were moderated, what markers, how many grades were changed. So we've got that data we can compare to over the semesters. The overall increase in the average grade for the subject was from a pass to a credit in both assignment 2 and assignment 3. And almost all of that was because we have moderated up a significant amount of grades. We found significant passes that actually fit the credit criteria, which would have been missed before because there were high passes which would not normally get moderated. The teaching staff reported to us that student queries regarding their grades and feedback notably decreased. Instead of getting 500 emails, they're getting 100 emails, for example. The overall student grade for 2024-30 was a credit, increasing from a pass over the previous 4 sessions. And the SES positive response was the highest ever for the subject in the history that the subject has run. We also had decreased additional assessments, despite increased cohort size. So we had 37 AAs in 2023-90, 13 in 24-30, and then last semester we had 12. So from the discussion, what the moderators reported, full disclosure, the moderators are Shiny and myself, was increased confidence in our decision-making. When I would normally and ah and go, oh, I'm not really sure if I can, if I should up this grade or if I should down this grade, I could go, Shiny, what do you think? And I felt more confident in those decisions. Adjusting marks, consistency across the cohort, we found that just like the data shows, that there was increased consistency and that the students noticed that and the students appreciated that. Also, these papers were being moderated to a higher standard. Overall feedback from us, from the marking team as well, and from our colleagues, the process seemed more comprehensive. We were able to moderate more papers, but there was significantly decreased stress from the moderation process, which if you've ever worked in a large subject, it's really, really stressful when you're facing down the barrel of 800 papers. This semester, we have 1,200 students, and that real sense of sharing the load and working collaboratively, we could then use the feedback to go back to our markers and support them in developing. We say, these are the things that we've noticed. These are the consistency issues. Let's work on it together in a really proactive, supportive way. The students notice, the students appreciate you, and really sort of change that discussion from being one of, oh, moderation, it's so difficult and boring, to let's get this moderation thing down because we can get better. Is that 10 minutes?
You're about bang on. Yep, that's perfect. Yeah.
It's really good for regional teaching and learning, I promise.
Look, I mean,
and some further reading if you want.
Beautiful, thank you. And look, of course, these will be sent out to people. These will be available, and the recording will be available to everyone as well. And we've got time for questions at the end. But thank you so much for that. I can't believe that as a process, it actually takes some time out of the moderation process. But then you're also getting more time back because there are less requests for additional assessment. There are less people, emailing in asking for, review of grade or review of marks or things like that. So
exactly.
A wonderful process.
It made the whole, it actually had a significant impact, and that impacted honestly, our mental health. Yeah. It was less stressful, less carrying the load.
Wins for everyone, students and staff. How fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We are on a time crunch, so Tim, I'm going to hand it straight over to you. Thank you so much.
So let's get this sorted. Can everyone see that? Yep, fantastic. Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be presenting today on a topic that's become a real passion of mine, perhaps a little bit sad, interactive oral assessments. And this presentation really is a team presentation. I'm very much indebted to Amita, an educational designer, who pretty much pulled this whole assessment together for us. And equally, Sarah, my physio colleague, who also took the brave step of jumping into using an interactive oral assessment for her third-year subject. The bulk of this is about my implementation of the assessment in my subject, but I'm going to certainly pull some of the results from Sarah's experience as well. So let's get a little bit of background. So the subjects, as I said, the third year subjects, mine is 313, which is a musculoskeletal subject. Sarah's is 301, a cardiothoracic physiotherapy subject, and both are really key with regards to the students' progression towards their final clinical year. In my subject, particularly, for years we've had a 2-hour theory exam as sort of one of the key assessment items to look at a variety of aspects of their understanding, including sort of clinical application. And interestingly, we found that over many years, students perform really poorly in this mode of assessment in comparison to other assessments they did, which were more clinical. And this is despite there being a lot of overlap with regards to the competencies that we were actually assessing. Now, in addition, the rise of generative AI had meant that an uninvigilated theory paper was something that really wasn't sustainable. So it gave us a great opportunity to explore what assessments were out there. And we, radically reimagined what assessment could potentially look like. And I think that one of the sort of the key things that that I looked at when we were thinking about new assessments is this idea that assessment is, increasingly a key for preparing students for work and life rather than necessarily just being a tool for measuring the student learning. So we implemented an interactive oral assessment with considerable assistance from the educational designers. Now, this form of assessment is not particularly novel. It's something that's been used extensively in physiotherapy and medicine and other fields as well for some time. I'm not going to go through great detail about some of the benefits, but some of the key things that I think are worth mentioning are the fact that it improves student engagement, it can enhance critical thinking, it can challenge persuasive communication, can increase the students' workplace readiness, which is also linked to potentially improved employability. Now, if we think about the context of our students who are mostly regional based, so we've got a majority of our students who come into physiotherapy come from regional areas, particularly New South Wales, and they traditionally, on graduation, go on to work in regions as well, which is fantastic. But in many instances, the amount of support that they will get in working in those areas won't be anywhere near as the support that their peers in metro areas will be getting. So they do need to be more self-reliant. They need to be more self-reflective as well. So if we think about the presentation just briefly, that what I really want to go through is thinking about my implementation, the preliminary results that we have from a couple of the third year subjects, and also just a quick discussion about the benefits and also some of the challenges of implementing an interactive oral assessment. So just to give you an idea as to what it looks like and sounds like, so the students would come in and they had 15 minutes to look at a unique client case history. They could make some notes, and they were preparing then for a dynamic discussion around that, that case, but also some of the material that they'd covered during the session. So what ensued was a 15-minute face-to-face discussion with the examiner. And one of the key things to understand about interactive oral is that usually scenario-based. And so in this case, the scenario was a performance review. The student was a recently graduated physio, and you as the assessor were their supervisor, and kind of going through this case amongst other cases that they might have looked at. So the bulk of the assessment really was gaining insight into their, them showing insight into the case, and we looked at various different aspects. And the things that we looked at were very much the same things that we wanted to look at when we had our theory paper. So we really were replicating a lot of the same competencies. On top of that, we gave them the opportunity to reflect on their learning journey so far and think about some of the processes they put in place to fill voids in understanding and so forth. Immediately after they'd finished their assessment, we gave them feedback, oral feedback, 3 to 5 minutes. And that was recorded, and that was then sent with their rubric to the students once we completed all of the assessments. And that's something that the students really valued. It was like they walked out with a good understanding as to how they performed. We wouldn't give them a mark, but they certainly had a good understanding as to areas that they might have excelled in and areas that they could improve on. So if we think about how we evaluated the implementation, it was largely through the subject evaluation survey. So we're looking at that in both the subjects, third-year subjects. And we put in 2 customised questions. So the IOA allowed me to develop skills that would be valuable in my future workplace experience. The preparation, resources and support provided by my teachers for the IOA was valuable and important in my ability to complete the task. And lastly, we compared the theory, the mean performance in 2023 for the theory paper to the 2024 interactive oral assessments. So what do we find? We found that the students were overwhelmingly positive about the experience in response to those 2 customised questions. But probably more importantly, more positively, are some of the comments that they provided. I was able to demonstrate my best performance. The IOA was a fantastic way to test our knowledge and prepare us for placement in our future careers. I found the interactive oral was great in allowing discussion and truly explaining your thoughts better than a written exam. So certainly really glowing endorsement from the students. If we think about the comparison from year, and we're not this is not direct comparison of apples with apples, but in 2023, in their written exams, particularly if we're looking at 313, we're looking at mid 50% on average across the 3 cohorts. And with the implementation of the interactive oral, we're seeing that the mean improved to 70%, which is certainly promising. So what we found was that the interactive oral was a really valuable assessment tool. It was unpredictable, it was authentic, it allowed for depth and breadth of discussion. It reduced student stress. The students were really well prepared for it. They came into it and it was exactly what they expected. And they actually, on the whole, enjoyed it. It really challenged their communication skills, which are pivotal for their future careers. And it gave them confidence in their capacity to be physios and demonstrate clinical skills, which they'll need to do in their final year. So what are some of the challenges of the implementation? And really the key one is the preparation time. So we need to prepare the students. So in our case, we provided them with mock assessments. We recorded mock assessments. We provided them sessions in class to be able to upskill them. But then writing the unique cases for the exam was pretty time consuming as well. But really, that is something that is an upfront time cost and is something that, subsequently you won't need to do. So as I said, it's enjoyable. It was really enjoyable as an assessor to be able to see how the students could really convey their understanding. If they didn't understand a question, you could pose it in a different way, and often that they had fantastic understanding and knowledge. And maybe this is why we're seeing such a difference between the different modes of assessment that we've used. It was time efficient. Once those upfront time costs had been factored in, once you actually got the student there, it was 15 minutes to assess, and then we gave them feedback, and then we could upload their grades. So yeah, in conclusion, it was viable, effective tool, and hugely positive student experience. It got over the issue of academic integrity, and it was a really authentic method of assessment, and it really was an efficient way of assessing students as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tim. We've about 5 seconds to spare, so you truly practice this. Well done. Look, I saw some questions pop up in the chat. We'll get to those at the end. It's going to be a really interesting discussion, I think, on LOs, definitely. But for now, we're going to hand over to Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you. You can see my screen. Excellent. So thank you. We're excited as a team to present today on kindness and connectedness, enhancing remote student support with peer evaluation. So earlier this year, we introduced a peer evaluation process to our embedded tutor program to provide our academic tutors with some professional development and feedback opportunities. And today we're going to share some of the insights and experiences from this process, led by our very kind and dedicated first year study advisors.
Thank you, Sarah. The Embedded Tutor Program, a little bit of background, commenced in 2021 and offers one-on-one tutor sessions to commencing students in key subjects to receive feedback on a draft assessment from an academic tutor. So students book in for a 20-minute Zoom session online via a booking tool, which is embedded in their subject site. Each session, up to about 50 subjects, are supported by approximately 60 academic tutors. As part of that, tutors receive training focusing on a transition pedagogy using a pedagogy of kindness. They were instructed to conduct the peer evaluation process with the same mindfulness, compassion, and empathy as they would with interacting with students as well. The next slide there. So a bit of background, especially regarding the pedagogy of kindness. So research has shown that connectedness is important for students in the development of self-efficacy. However, this is obviously a challenge for those studying remotely, including those who often choose to stay in their regional, rural and remote communities. Employing a pedagogy of kindness, showing care, compassion and empathy, they get to interact positively, affects the student's experience. Peer evaluation is widely implemented in higher education institutions as part of professional development. So we get the chance to work with our casual academics, especially giving them the opportunity for that professional development. So this study evaluated the impact of peer evaluation on connectedness and service delivery through structured facilitation of that feedback. And it will present how the process provided opportunities for reflective practice, relationship building, collaboration, and overall support for students. Thanks, Sarah.
So we looked at Lauren Stevenson's research around pedagogy of kindness, and it outlined that extending compassion to students while not compromising the rigour or course expectations resulted in high student engagement and learning. And we found this to be true for our team as well. So this research relates well to our work as embedded tutor, both to students and to one another as colleagues in this really decentralised online workplace. In our small team, we're almost exclusively online. So that's a brief, and by that I mean off-site online. So that's a brief look at the philosophy underpinning this program, and now to focus briefly on the nuts and bolts of the peer review program. So study advisors and manager in consultation set up the teams of two who are working together. The reviewer undertook the observation, which could have taken place during 2 to 3 live tutor sessions or via recorded sessions. The reviewee nominated at least 3 dimensions of learning that they wanted to focus for their peer review, and we'll see those in the next slide. The reviewer completed the Embedded Tutor Program peer review report with examples of the chosen dimension within the recorded or observed session. And then the reviewee undertook a reflection on their tutoring practice. The reviewer then met to provide meaningful and actionable feedback on tutoring practices to the reviewee. So what we were doing is we were trying to model with one another how we wanted to interact with students. So, giving us an opportunity to practice that with a peer and get feedback in hopes that that would inform and improve our practice with students, and thereby encouraging and supporting their feelings of connectedness to the institution. So just into the next slide now, please, Sarah. So there were 9 categories that we considered being relevant to the online tutoring work we do with students in our 20-minute session, and they were developed in consultation with CSU education designers and their professional development program for first-year academics. So our areas of focus that we could choose to select our 3 areas to be reviewed were strategies to engage students. Strategies to engage students are used in teaching. Students' prior knowledge and experience is built upon. Teaching caters for student diversity. Students are encouraged to develop and expand their conceptual understanding. Students are made aware of key learning outcomes. Our tutors actively link theory and practice. They use learning environments, education resources and techniques appropriate. They present materials logically, and they seek feedback on students' understanding and act on this accordingly.
Hi, so I will be, I'm Tasfia, and I will be presenting the results of the feedback forms. The peer evaluation process was introduced in 2024, which is this year. And since the beginning of the year, 21 tutors have participated in the professional development activity. 6 tutors have participated more than once. Tutors together agreed that the process facilitated constructive feedback. And I emphasize on constructive because just getting a feedback may not always be of benefit if it's not constructive. Anyways, however, most felt that the feedback they received was really positive. Tutors found observing other tutors insightful to their practice and indicated that they would look for the future opportunities to implement the observed strategies. Tutors agreed the process positively influenced communication skills and overall contributed to improving delivery of student support. Some challenges of delivery of student support were scheduling difficulties, and as most of our tutors are casual academics, so there was some problem with availabilities. Yep.
I'm going to share some words and quotes from the free-form comments in the survey. So that constructive evaluation improves skills, connection and collaboration, reflective practice, professional development, building professional relationships and collaboration again, fostering a sense of community and mutual support. It was noted that it was really important to observe others at work, and there was great value through observation and gaining insights into colleagues' practices. One person said it facilitates constructive feedback and creates a collaborative environment where the team can learn from each other and continuously improve. The fact that it built people's confidence and gave just more structure to reflection was there. Another person said reflective practice is the key to quality teaching, and the peer review process was an integral part of formally reflecting on your practice, and was a great way to build practice. And so that issue of modelling again was mentioned by people with specific examples. It was mentioned that people really valued the different styles of tutors, especially when students coming from a range of backgrounds with different learning styles and a variety of academic skills. It was noted that there is a special amount of self-reflection that goes into preparing for a session when you know a peer will observe you. So, and that there were many tutors completing the peer review process who were highly qualified, paired with someone of less years of experience. And this created that sense of vulnerability, sometimes for both parties, and it opened this unique space to share, reflect, learn and grow. There were some tutor concerns, as Tasfia mentioned, about time, especially with casual tutors, but also, you know, this was a sort of safe place between tutor and student. So we were recording those conversations, and there was that, you know, possibly a breach of confidentiality, although consent was obviously sought. So it came through about those themes of constructive evaluation, improved skills, all that connection and collaboration, and the significance and value of reflective practice.
Thank you, Leonie. In conclusion, overall tutors indicated that peer evaluation process was a positive experience and encouraged collaboration. Tutors gained knowledge and strategies to overcome challenges without explicit feedback. This provided evidence that modelling and observing good practice is a valuable tool for continuous improvement of tutoring programs and enhances reflective practice. We propose that peer evaluations should be implemented with the pedagogy of kindness for academic student support roles to promote building relationships between staff and students. This process promotes a sustainable process of professional development, providing growth for the tutor, but also growth for the program. Thank you.
Thank you, team. That was really wonderful. I think a lot of people in this group really resonate with that idea of a pedagogy of kindness. And it's really wonderful to see, you know, a community of practice at work in a big group like this. So thank you so much for your presentation. And we're going to move on to our final presentation. So Marie-Louise, I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
And yeah, that's it. Excellent. Okay, can you see my screen? Good. It's kind of weird because I'm living in a vacuum here. And I'm not getting it the way I want it. So I'm just going to move something. Has that taken it away? Yes. Okay. I'm going to be facing away from you guys because it's ended up on a different screen. Okay. I'm working with Rebecca Lindsay, who is teaching on a different campus to me, and I've done the subject for this particular assessment for 2 years, and she has come on in this last year and picked up that assessment. So she and I have written this paper together, but she's at a conference and unable to attend today. So we're reimagining assessment for an ancient language. That's radical. So what were we doing? Interactive orals presentations. We've already had one this time, but this time we're doing it in an ancient language subject, and that is for Biblical Hebrew 1. Our cohorts include regional, remote and metropolitan students, many of them who go into regional communities when they start work. They tend to be older students. Our median age for the 3 cohorts that we're looking at is 49. And they're culturally and linguistically diverse. So the interactive orals offers students the opportunity to hone the oral communication skills required for their industry and community engagements. We found exams and written papers did not prepare students for the kind of verbal communication required in ministry. Within this professional context, people are required to think on their feet and to communicate at the appropriate level for their audience. Hence, in the 3 Hebrew subjects, we've scaffolded the scenarios to move from peer-to-peer communication, which is the one we're looking at today, to the minister talking to the congregation, and then to add in a higher level for those going on to PhDs, we did an academic communication in the scenario of a translation committee. So what we're looking at today is that first level. So School of Theology subjects lean heavily on essay-based assessments, which many of our cohorts struggle to write. The language subjects include the additional challenge of closed book exams, where memorisation is essential, but very difficult for any student over 30. Added to this difficulty is the fact that language learning requires the student to learn a new alphabet and to memorise the meta-language that's needed to describe the language itself. In the past, we found retention rates were very low. A cohort often started 5 to 12 students, and by census date had reduced to 1 or 2, with little or no uptake of Hebrew 2 and 3. If a student has not quite acquired the meta-language, it means that their written work will often be confusing to the marker. An interactive oral allows us to ask what they mean by certain terminology and allows students to explain what they actually know about Hebrew and whatever language tools they have. This also allows students to experience success and gain confidence, which hopefully encourages them to stay in the subject. The aim of the project was to address the challenges of retention and progression of students in this course, as well as enhance their communication skills in preparation for their professional work. Therefore, the closed book exam was replaced with an interactive oral, and this paper discusses the results to date. I just thought I'd share the interactive oral scenario with you so you'd have an idea of what they're doing in this particular one. The scenario is a family member or friend is curious about you learning Hebrew and wants you to read some Hebrew to them. You show off and recite a passage from memory, and then you read another passage. Then the two of you have a conversation about how Hebrew works, what individual words mean, how you know what you're reading, and why you're learning Hebrew in the first place. Just to make a note on this, students learning a new language are often embarrassed to say the language out loud, and this is one way to get over that hump as well. So our method is that we engaged in collaborative reflection to assess the impact of the interactive oral, drawing on data from 4 sources: the student satisfaction survey, student oral responses to the question, how did you find the interactive oral, in the debrief time immediately after the interactive oral assessment. The third one was student reflections on the impact of the interactive oral 6 months later in response to 4 open-ended questions in an email. This has only been done with the last cohort. We're sort of developing our research techniques, and we'll see some of their responses later. And fourth, our own observations of the impact interactive orals had on student engagement, learning and retention. This data demonstrates the self-reflection of the students on their learning across time, alongside with our own reflections on what we're doing. So the results include cohorts from 2022 to 2024, giving an overall number of, guess what, 5 students. That's the problem. So the results from the student surveys give us a very large extent to the interactive oral approach supporting their learning, and also a large extent result for the preparation, resources and support provided by my teachers. All the students showed positive engagement in the preparation of the interactive oral itself and in their learning and assessments following the interactive oral assessment. This slide contains students' immediate reactions to the exemplar, and I put this in for a bit of light relief. This was one of Rebecca's classes. I've just rewatched these videos and wanted to say thank you to you and Marie-Louise for making these. They were encouraging and entertaining and helpful. And then another student said, "You're a really good actor," which made us laugh because we weren't acting. But the results immediately after the interactive oral are really interesting because it's really fresh in their minds. So one student said, "I really enjoyed going deeper into the passage." Another student said, "My children kept asking me about the meaning of what I was reciting." Another student said, "That was fun." So that's a nice response to an assessment. Another said, "My brother has been trying to recite back to me some of the Hebrew he's heard me practicing, which I think proves the good value of the assessment." And another said, "It was good, not as scary as I expected." So in their reflection 6 months on from their interactive oral, students noted they continued to use the skills from this assessment in their learning, in their industry settings and on social media. And these are the questions. So did you like this form of assessment? How did the interactive oral assist in your learning? How did the interactive oral connect practically with real life? And how would you improve this assessment? So we don't have time to go through all of it, but I thought that I'd just share some of the comments. I thoroughly enjoyed the interactive oral assessment, mostly because it involved personal interaction and live two-way communication. I did like the form of assessment, as I thought it provided a good mix of exam format and the ability to prepare in advance. I also appreciate that it was conversational, and I feel Beck made it a very calm environment, which was much appreciated. I might skip the next one. Oh, yeah, that says much the same. This one, I found that it aided my learning of the spoken form of the language and reinforced grammatical concepts we'd learned in class. I still remember parts of the passage, and she goes on to talk about, or he, what she'd learned, being able to apply it in other places. I have used what I learned in church and shared it as part of my job. So that was really helpful, to having that backing from what I learned in class. Again, I retained some of the passage I learned, but what's really good in this one is that she read a transliterated phrase, tohu vavohu, which was referenced in a joke on social media, and she was able to recognise it from the Genesis 1 passage. I think I was able to recognise the transliteration more quickly because I'd practiced speaking the phrase out loud and was therefore familiar with the sound of the words. Now, there were some verbal results, and one particularly that I wanted to put in. In the 3 years, only one student prepared a formal paper for the interactive oral, even though he'd been told not to, and he launched into it before the examiner gently led the student away from the paper and into the scenario conversation. This student was the only one who verbally expressed a preference for the translation assignment over the interactive oral. The lecturers noted the ease of marking, as students' capacity was immediately clear, and an increase in student confidence was also observed because they were comfortable pronouncing the Hebrew and talking about it. It also made it easier for us to mark. Overall, students responded well. More importantly, the results suggested that the interactive oral shows promise in helping us to achieve our 2 aims. So the first aim was to enhance students' communication skills. While further tracking of this impact is needed, the students' 6-month reflections demonstrate that they're beginning to use the skills learned in the interactive oral in communication with family, church communities, and on social media. And the second, addressing the challenges of retaining and progressing students in Hebrew language studies. I have to say, with the small cohorts, there's not enough long-term evidence yet, but it's hopeful because the 2023 student completed all 3 Hebrew subjects, and both students from this year have completed 2 and have already enrolled in Hebrew 3. I think I'm just about up. So just about small sizes, we're sort of taking that into account and realising our study needs to be much longer to get the numbers. And finally, interactive orals with large cohorts are scalable, and we're planning to have large cohorts. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Margaret. I think it's, theology has historically relied fairly heavily on essay-based exams, haven't they? So it's really wonderful to see, yourself and Beth and a few others kind of stepping out of that and into interactive orals and more innovative assessment, especially in a field like learning Hebrew and Greek. So that's really wonderful. So thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations. We are going to move into, we've got 15 minutes for Q&A. At this point, there are a lot of questions in the chat, absolutely. Most of them are centered around IAOs and how they work, how they're going to work in the future of potential programmatic assessments and what AI means for IAOs. And so at this point, one of the things I might do is ask Anita, who has kind of been leading the charge around IAOs in the university, to maybe give us a little bit of what she thinks. I wonder if you've been following the questions, but if you could maybe talk to the group a little bit about IAOs and whether there's particular disciplines they're best used for. Potentially they're not, they may be not the best choice for every single assessment type or discipline or context. So getting maybe a better understanding of that would be really useful. So Anita, do you know?
Thanks, Kelly. And I have to thank everyone for that animated chat around interactive orals. And I'm seeing some of the academics who have implemented it responding to those questions. So thank you so much. Just basically, of course, this is an evolving space. So really we can't, guarantee anything. But thus far, it has served us very well in, addressing academic integrity challenges, but more than that, being confident about our students' skills before, letting them move on to the next subject or into the workplace. It is scalable. There are those challenges of deep fakes and, what was shown in the programmatic assessment session last week. And we do have to take that into consideration. One of the solutions to that would be moving them face to face, which may not necessarily be practical considering the regional nature of our cohort, but that's one. And I must say, I do get some sleepless nights when I think about the deep fakes and the challenges that are coming. So far, what we have done is that we have implemented interactive orals pretty much right from enabling cohorts up to master's level. There is no such thing as they're more suited for any discipline. They can work in any scenario, because in the end, no matter what profession students are in, they do have to communicate. So it's very essential skills that we help students to develop. So absolutely practically applies to any subject at any level, only except for PhD, every other subject and discipline area. And we have implemented in a wide variety of disciplines within CSEd over the last 3+ years. So more than happy to share if anybody wants to reach out later. So basically, up to now, majority of them have been implemented online via Zoom, and only like Tim and maybe 1 or 2 other academics have done face-to-face based on the nature of their cohort. So I think it works very well, but we do have to now consider the new challenges that are on the horizon and not that far in the future to adapt. The other thing too also is it's not necessary to have an interactive oral as every assessment. In my opinion, it can work really well as a single gatekeeper assessment. So I can see it can be a lot of burden on academics when they're assessing and they're concerned about the integrity of students' work. And oral defense is one mechanism that they have got, but it does put a lot of workload onto academics. So instead, if we have one that we can be assured of students' learning and that confirm that they have achieved the learning outcomes, I think that's kind of one of the aspects that I've been promoting for a little while now, that we have to think of it as a gatekeeper assessment rather than trying to include verbal component in each one. I think that is what something we have to take into the whole planning of programmatic assessment as we move forward.
Thank you for that. And I did put in the chat that if anyone did want to learn a little bit more about IOAs, there's a link there to that, and the leader is probably the person who would speak to anyway. Just really quickly, I know, Tim, you did mention about, the workload up front, but is there a benefit to that? So whilst there might be a fairly heavy workload getting it set up, are you seeing a benefit on the other side of that in terms of, again, say, moderation time is lessened, or, students asking for additional assessment or review of marks or grades, and even retention and progression rates?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, look, I mean, once I put in that time, I can just roll this out with minor tweaks to the client cases in the future, just for sort of integrity basis. But yeah, it was a really, really efficient way of doing it once you're up there, because we use the telehealth unit. So we actually did real-time moderation because we've got 3 campuses running. And so that allowed us to be able to do one on one campus with 2 others watching and so forth, and we could then discuss their responses. So yeah, kind of like it was, and that also allowed us to be able to then look at marginal or fail grades and look at the video quite easily. That also, I suppose another thing is the time-wise is in terms of upskilling other assessors. So they don't go to the meetings, so you become the expert, and you need to then impart that knowledge to your team. So I suppose that once you've got a fair few exemplars or a range of grades that you can demonstrate on video, that really is helpful for new staff or staff that haven't used an interactive oral before to be able to then upskill. I don't know if I covered it. There was a few parts to your question. I don't know if I got them all, but hopefully some.
No, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Look, I will open it up. There were quite a lot of questions, as some of them have been answered, but I will open up the session. We've probably got about 5-10 minutes, 7 minutes. If anyone has a question that they hasn't been answered yet, or they just have a comment they'd like to see in public group.
Hi, Kelly. Can you hear me? Nicole Mitchell from Port Macquarie. Hi, everyone. So I'm an educational designer, and I've also did some sessional lecturing. So I held interactive oral assessment earlier this year for an online consumer behaviour class, and just want to say, yeah, once you've set it up, it's actually much quicker to do the marking if you're doing it sort of live. So I, ended up marking 30 assessments over 2 days, and I didn't go completely crazy. So I think those people who in the marking mill will understand that. The other thing too, I think we don't focus on that often is that it's actually really what we get out of it as academics or lecturers. I finally got to meet my students whose work I'd been reading. So that in itself, it was kind of more fun and enjoyable. And, you know, it's like, who am I going to meet next, you know? And I think, Mary Louise, I think perhaps you can relate to that as well. If you perhaps hadn't necessarily got to know your students so well, but by having those conversations, I think that's real value in that. So I think there is that issue with AI, which was shown to us last week. So that is something to overcome. I do think that perhaps we also can tweak our assessments so they are highly personal and highly niche. So I had the students focus on a local small business, and they had to develop a marketing pitch for that and specific local market. So AI possibly could make it up, but you know, I could drill down into that further. And then ultimately, perhaps it is about capstone face-to-face programmatic assessments, as I mentioned earlier as well. So definitely an interesting and wicked problem. I think Kelly, the other Kelly, mentioned that. So yeah, interesting to see where this leads us. Thanks.
I'm just really interested in the pedagogy of kindness. I thought that was a really, really interesting thing. Working with Rebecca on coaching her in this style of assessment and knowing how much time Amita has spent with her, and realising the helpfulness of me working with another academic, because there aren't that many Hebrew teachers around, and no one in my school wants to teach the languages, and I love the languages, but you sit out there on your own. And I just loved hearing about that project. My school is never going to be that big, but we have been talking about looking at our large for us, number of PhD students who would really benefit from doing some tutoring and that kind of work. And I just would really like to, well, I'm going to read the paper again and then just go back and have a chat to the school about that. But pedagogy of kindness just is what we work on in the School of Theology, but to actually apply it intentionally to developing academic staff sounds fantastic.
One of the big things that came through for me from all of the presentations was not just about the stress load for students, so how it impacted the stress load for students positively, but that it impacted academics in a really positive way. Whether that was engaging with students in this type of an assessment, you know, or even, you know, the moderation, that collaborative moderation processes. So we're you know, engaging in a real community of practice, you know, really positively impacting the mental health of both our students and our staff. And I think that is just so important. Especially at the moment when the university is in a bit of a, well, the university sector in general is in a bit of a state of flux, and a lot of people are losing their jobs. I think it's really important to remember to have that connectedness with each other as well. So I really like to see these other things. Any other questions? We do have a couple more minutes. Anything else? Look, that's it. This is being recorded. You can go back and watch it again. I do believe they're going to be sending out all the presentations and things as well that you can have another look at. I might just finish off reading out what Kirsten wrote, because it really resonated with me. And that says, what has come through for me in this session is people acknowledging the work that came before them, acknowledging collegiality and collaboration, focusing on students and approaching their work with kindness. This is the kind of university I want to work in. And I think that's just a lovely way to finish this particular section. So a big thank you so much to all of our presenters today. It really has been wonderful to see the work that you're doing. I have no doubt that what you are doing is really positively impacting our students in such a wonderful way. To the rest of you, thank you all so much for coming today. We would love to get some feedback. I don't know if Mark, you can put the feedback form in the session for me there. If not, I know they'll be sending it out for us there. But we'd love to get some feedback from you on the session in general, and of course CSEdX as well, because we're always hoping to make this a better experience for you guys. But thank you so much for coming along, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.
I'll just pop that in now. Thanks, Kelly. If you can bear with me for 2 seconds, please.
We'd love it if we could take 2 minutes just to clear that up. Thank you so much, everyone.